It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. I have the pleasure today of talking with Jeff Horstman. He's the executive director of ShoreRivers, an Easton-based nonprofit that focuses on protecting our Eastern Shore waterways through science-based advocacy, restoration, and education. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me today.
Good afternoon, Donna. It's great to be here.
Now, as you're aware, what brought me to you was that I had recently read a book called Why Island. It was published in 1977 by a man named Boyd Gibbons. I'm sure you're familiar with the book.
Absolutely, yep.
And it talked a lot about your family history, and the more I was reading that book and then delved off into other things about your family history, I started to regret not ever meeting your mother, who I think must have been an amazing woman.
Yeah, Mom had basically 3 or 4 lives, and, she passed away in March, and we're just sort of all getting over it and coming to terms with it.
I'm really sorry for the loss. In preparing for this interview, I was reading a New York Times article dated February 15th, 1972, and it's written in clearly 1972 style, putting female descriptive words in the lead. But here goes. Key Largo, Florida. Slim, blonde, and vivacious Nina Horstman, who was with her husband Robert, founded the Sea Mammal Motivational Institute 2 years ago, is delighted to have a new and permanent home for her charges on the grounds of the Posh Ocean Reef Club. The Institute, also known as SEAMAMM, is a nonprofit research organization dedicated to the study of diving mammals. The study and training of these mammals include harbor seals and sea lions, is conducted with no restraint on the animals. They are free to swim away anytime they choose. Going on in this article, it says, leaving the Horstman 68-foot research vessel, the Explorer II, when it was in the dry Tortugas off of Key West in the spring of 1971, Tinkerbell, who had a clipped flipper as a result of an accident in her pre-Horstman circus days, left the scene and headed north, arriving 9 days later at Boca Grande, Florida, where she flopped exhausted beside the swimming pool of Mrs. Rutherford Stuyvesant Pierpont. Mrs. Pierpont's neighbor, Arthur Houghton Jr., president of Steuben Glass and chairman of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, set in motion the effort to join Tinkerbell and the Horstmans. Houghton has since become a staunch supporter of SEAMAMM. Now, all of this sort of ties together what happened in some of those chapters, yes?
Yeah, it sounds like a fairy tale, but it's true.
And so your mom was married to your dad. Your dad was from Pennsylvania, correct?
That's correct, yep.
By what I saw, had a past in radio as well, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, my dad was a radio operator in the Navy.
As was I. But your dad was very into this organization that he and your mom founded for the research of these marine mammals. And you today, as the executive director of ShoreRivers, seems to have inherited some of these genes, yes?
I think so, yeah, quite a few.
Somewhere along the line, well, Mr. Houghton was the neighbor who became involved with this organization that your mom and dad founded. He then became your mom's second husband, yes?
That's correct, yeah. He became my stepfather. I can't remember exactly when. I'm going to say it was like 78, 79.
Were you down in the Keys during all of this? Do you remember?
Absolutely. We all lived on the boat for about 4 years. We were homeschooled, and we were working every day with the marine mammals, scuba diving and training them and feeding them. And I was actually filleting quite a lot of fish and feeding those things for years.
And was there also the Second Life up in New York City with the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Parsons School of Design? I also read lots of other things that your stepfather was involved in.
Yeah, my stepfather was involved in a lot of things in New York City, sort of the antithesis of sort of the boat people that we were. He was involved with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Lincoln Center, was very involved in the social scene in New York City, which was completely foreign to all of us.
And were you going up there also as young kids growing up on a boat, or were you left in Florida?
When my mother and Arthur Houghton, I guess, fell in love and they started to hang out a lot, My dad stayed on the boat, and we moved to Maryland, I guess it was 79, to Arthur Houghton's country place here across from Y Island, as you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. Did you find yourself immediately loving Maryland and loving the rivers of Maryland? And how did you become who you are? And some of your moms, by the way, research followed her along, right?
Yeah. So there was a facility here called Y Institute, and most of the marine mammals came with us to Y Institute, and that research continued for several years. I was about 15 when we moved to the farm full time. I didn't like it at first because I had to go to school because I hadn't been going to school before. And then I just sort of fell in love with the rivers, ended up working as an assistant game warden on Y Island when I was in college, went to the local college here, Washington College, and I just fell in love with the Chesapeake and all of the natural beauty and natural wildlife that was here.
I guess it's the female in me, and just hearing about these stories with your mom's passion in creating some of these things. She sounds like an amazingly cool person, like just the type of mom that was out in the field, that was doing things, that was researching these. Tell me about her.
Mom was an amazing force. It was her impetus that got the first harbor seal that we got from Rockport, Maine. When we got that first harbor seal, we brought it down to the Jersey Shore where we were living, and my dad was working in Pennsylvania. And eventually we got 2 more harbor seals and then a sea lion, and then National Geographic did an article on our family, and that's when the idea was born to move these mammals to the Florida Keys for marine research, salvage, and training. That's how that all happened. It was all Mom.
I think back to, and I'm going to date myself here, but surely you will remember, I think back to the days watching Flipper and thinking that would just be the coolest childhood ever, and you apparently had this childhood.
Yeah, I was very close to, I had a 14-foot skiff with an outboard engine, and we'd put the seals on it, and we'd go out to the reef and swim, and it was fun. It was really great. But, living on a boat isn't great. You give up a little bit. I think Sandy and the people that lived on Flipper, they had a nice house to live in.
So obviously you do remember Flipper. I'm not alone.
Yeah, I definitely remember Flipper. In fact, there were actually 6 or 7 Flippers, and one of them was in Marathon, Florida, which was stationed right next to us, and we used to take our seals over to swim with the dolphins.
What became of this nonprofit? Does it exist? Did it form into something else, or is it still around?
The Sea Mammal Motivational Institute sort of faded away. The applications that the seals and the marine mammals were doing sort of were replaced by robotics and technology. And we actually hooked up with Jacques Cousteau's boat and traded interns, and all of that sort of first-level research has been replaced in many ways by technology.
Fair enough. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. I'm talking today with Jeff Horstman. He's the executive director of ShoreRivers, an Easton, Maryland-based nonprofit that focuses on protecting the Eastern Shore waterways through science-based advocacy, restoration, and education. So, Jeff, following your mom's death, and that was in March, you created a fund in her memory for ShoreRivers, yes?
Yeah, so I had a long career in finance in the Philadelphia, Wilmington area, and about 7 years ago, we came down as a family back to the family farm, and the rivers have gotten really polluted just in my lifetime. From the time I was moved here at 14 to I am here now at age 60, the rivers have really deteriorated. And I was talking to Mom about trying to form a watershed group, and she offered to hire and pay for the First Miles Y Riverkeeper, which we did, and we formed a group called the Midshore Riverkeeper Conservancy. At that time, it was Tim Junkin was the executive director, and so I started to try to clean up the river in that fashion. 2 years later, we merged with the Chester River Association and the Sassafras River Association, and we became ShoreRivers, and I became executive director.
In recent history, since your mom's death, you now created this Nina Rodel Houghton Fund, yes?
That's correct. And that fund is at ShoreRivers, and it goes to support these river keepers in perpetuity because it was a big love of Mom to take care of these rivers where she brought her seals back in the late 70s.
And the fact that you did add in perpetuity is a big deal. Explain why that's a big deal.
People like to give to endowments because it means their contributions continue to work forever. And when you build an endowment, you have a long-term sort of goal to raise a fair amount of money in the campaign, and then you only use the interest off that money to support the salaries and the work of these environmentalists who are working, as you said, to clean the rivers through environmental advocacy, restoration, and education.
And so for more information on that, and we'll keep saying this so that if you want to, the listeners, make a donation towards this or any of the other ways you can help Shore Rivers, it's shorerivers.org. And for the fund in particular, shorerivers.org/Houghton, HOUGHTON-fund. I think many of us know the rivers, the Chesapeake, is not what they were 50 years ago, not even 20 years ago, in some cases not even 5 years ago. How can people help?
Well, again, I'm just the executive director. I'm not the outreach person, but I'll do my best. There's several watershed organizations throughout the entire Chesapeake Bay. There's probably 18 waterkeeper groups, all with river keepers, and they all have outreach components like river-friendly yards. They have advocacy groups. They talk about controlling pollution, picking up trash, working with our regulators to provide better regulation, how to help with enforcement. There's a number of ways that people can help, and we also have a very large environmental education contingency, and we try to involve our diverse populations throughout the watershed.
Some of your work is you are actually out working with the farmers, helping them figure out better ways of managing their crops for them and for the Chesapeake, yes?
Yeah, our agricultural outreach component is our largest. Agriculture is the largest contributor of pollution to some of our rivers, and we've put in millions of dollars of stream restoration and retrofitting fields to have better drainage, to manage the nutrients that come off the fields, and we work with conservation drainage, the Maryland Department of Ag, our soil conservation districts. But, we're definitely trying to use water and nutrients much smarter than we have.
You can't rebuild some of what we're seeing here, but in other ways you can, right?
So, yeah, we have done a lot of stream restoration where we've rebuilt streams and we've rebuilt wetlands. We have a map that shows I think we've done about 143 projects on the Delmarva, all to reduce pollution, all on ag or urban areas. In addition to pollution, we're also fighting these environmental rollbacks that are happening now from the current administration, where they're rolling back the regulations on the Clean Water Act. They're rolling back the amount of discharge you can put into rivers. They're reducing the number of streams and waterways that are connected and protected. It's just hard to work so hard on all of these restoration projects to see these massive environmental rollbacks that benefit polluters.
And you can't do the work that you do without the public's help, which, again, if people want to help, where can they go to help you?
So they can go to shorerivers.org, or they can go to any one of their watershed organizations. Every river on the Chesapeake has a riverkeeper and a watershed organization that are worth looking into and helping out.
All right, we're going to take another short break. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Jeff Horstman. He's the Executive Director of Shore Rivers, an Easton, Maryland-based nonprofit that focuses on protecting Eastern Shore waterways through science-based advocacy, restoration, and education. I'm going to read another paragraph from Shore Rivers' website because I think it's important for people to understand if they don't know what Shore Rivers does. It says, we advocate for strong, clean water laws to ensure a legacy of thriving waterways and help galvanize communities to act to improve the health of our rivers. Shore Rivers assists landowners, towns, and communities in funding and developing innovative pollution reduction projects. We help farmers and adopt more sustainable practices and protect their lands from runoff and erosion. ShoreRivers educates students across the Eastern Shore, teaching about our river networks and helping our young people both develop a connection and care for the rivers and appreciate how their own lives are enriched by this connection with nature. Jeff, you said you've seen in your own life the effects of pollution and the degradation of the Chesapeake Bay. What positive things are you seeing about people wanting to help, about things that are making a difference right now?
Well, to give you an idea, when I was 14 years old and I moved here, we used to jump off a bridge called the Y Island Bridge, and you could see the bottom at certain times of the year. And since we moved back, you really can't see, 6 or 8 inches because of the amount of pollution, the sediment, the algae blooms. We have seen some small improvements in water quality over time, and one of the big successes is the subaquatic vegetation, SAV, which is coming back. There used to be sort of acres and acres, hundreds of thousands of acres of subaquatic vegetation creating these meadows in the river, which would then clean the water and provide food and habitat for a lot of the wildlife. I'm seeing some farming practices get better. Definitely farming practices are getting better, which is good. And I'm seeing people being a little bit more aware of the environment, which is good. So I guess those would be the big benefits.
Actually, interestingly enough, back to the Y Island book, Boyd Gibbons wrote about that Y Island bridge, and the very same thing you just said, with being able to see to the bottom, and now no longer.
I live right next to that bridge now. This year's been a tremendously bad water quality year with all the rain, and many of our bacteria tests come back with it's unsafe to swim.
And how about oysters over there? Are you seeing a healthy population? Are you not? Are you concerned? Or is there the ongoing contention between the environmental groups and the watermen and women groups? Yeah, so we would like to base the oyster catch and fishery on science. And the oystermen and watermen generally want to say, well, they have a feeling that it's going to be a good year and we're just going to take as much as we can. They have some of the big oyster restoration projects have been very successful. But as far as I'm concerned, where I am, oysters are geographically extinct from overfishing and pollution. Which is extremely concerning because what do oysters do?
Well, they filter the water, as you know, 50 gallons, they say. But oysters are filter feeders, and we're working with other things. And with climate change, the bay is becoming fresher, and so it's hard to get oysters to have a good reproduction or spat set here in some of the north of the Bay Bridge, and even where I am on the Y River now.
Speaking of climate change and going back to how this conversation started with marine mammals, the fact that we're seeing so many porpoises now, what most people call dolphins, is this related to climate change, do you think? Is this related to food not being available in other places for them?
So there's been a number of theories now that we're seeing so many more porpoises in the bay than we have in prior years. One theory is that the water's a little cleaner, which it is just a little bit cleaner, but the main theory seems to be that they have to come up here to get food because of the overfishing of menhaden and other commercial fishing.
And the overfishing of menhaden was more the problem that was being seen in Virginia, but there is really no division in the Chesapeake Bay when it comes to menhaden. They swim between state lines.
Yep, they do.
Jeff, what else have I not touched on that you would like relayed? Because a lot of our listeners are concerned with the health and well-being of the Chesapeake Bay.
I can tell you that the number one thing I think you can do over the next several months is vote. Because of the tremendous rollbacks in environmental regulations and air emissions and water protections, if we don't vote and we don't get an administration that cares about the environment, I think years, decades of work will be undone.
Thank you for your time today and for all that you do for the Chesapeake Bay and the rivers of the Eastern Shore.
Hey, thank you very much. I enjoyed talking with you, and have a good rest of the summer.
Likewise, this is Donna Cole on the 1430 Connection. We'll see you next week.